Today we will do maxillary major connector. There are 6 major type of maxillary major connector. First one is the single palatal bar. This is the picture of single palatal bar. Why it is known as a bar? Bar is when the width is less than 8 mm, then it is known as a bar. This width, the palatal connector component of less than 8 mm in width, is referred to as a bar. This width, the width of this component, this palatal connector component, this component is less than 8 mm. 8 mm in width, it is known as bar. So this is the bar, and it is single. It is in the palate, so it is known as single palatal bar. So here is the picture of single palatal bar. It's a least logical of all palatal connector, and to maintain the rigidity it has to be made bulky. So in order to maintain the rigidity, this portion has to be made bulky, and it drive least support from the palate. Comparing to the all other major connector, all other 6 major connector, it drive least support from the palate area, and it is narrow, and half oval with the thickest point at the center. When we see it in cross section, it is half oval. It is half oval in shape of this bar is half oval in shape with the thickest point at the center. So this is the thickest point. This is the thickest point, and thickest point is present at the center. So thickest point is present at the center. It is half oval in shape, and it drives least support from the palate. So what are the indication where we will give this type of maxillary major connector or single palatal bar? It is only indication for its use is an interim partial denture, or in case of temporary partial denture, until a more definitive treatment can be considered. So it is least desirable, least logical. It is not indicated. Its indication is only when we are giving temporary removable partial denture or interim partial denture. Only then the single palatal bar is considered. Otherwise we don't give this major connector. It drive least support. It To maintain the rigidity, it has to be made bulky. It is least logical, and the width of this bar is less than 8 mm in width. So, and it is contraindicated. This arrangement, this single palatal bar, is contraindicated in distal extension cases, and in case we have to we give the anterior teeth are to be replaced. When we have to replace the anterior teeth are to be replaced. This arrangement is contraindicated in distal extension situation, and when anterior teeth are to be replaced. These are the contraindication indicated only in case of interim partial denture, when we use it as a interim partial denture or for temporary RPD. And it is a half oval in shape. It is half oval in shape with the thickest point at the center. So this is all about single palatal bar. And the second maxillary major connector is the single palatal strap. This is the picture of the single palatal strap. This is the picture of single palatal strap. This is the strap. What is the difference between strap and the bar? Strap is when this width is greater than 8 mm. this width is greater than 8 mm, then it is known as a strap. It should not be less than 8 mm, it should be greater than 8 mm, then it is known as a strap. And it has suitable rigidity without excessive bulk. Without excessive bulk. For bar, we have to make it bulky to maintain rigidity, but it has a suitable rigidity. We don't have to increase the bulk in this case. And its width should be increased as the edentulous span increase in length. As the edentulous span increases, the width of strap is also increased. And it's the best suited for short span, for the short span and the tooth supported edentulous areas. In case of a tooth supported edentulous area, this is considered. And what are the advantages? Advantages of this strap is that it covers the large area of the palatal tissue, so it helps distribute the stress over the broader area. So larger area of the palatal tissue is covered by the strap. Larger tissue is covered by the strap. So stress is distributed evenly over the broader area. In case of bar, only less palatal tissue is covered. In this case, in strap, larger tissue area is covered. So it distributes stress over the larger area. Larger area of the palatal tissue. It helps distribute stress over the broader area. Disadvantage: it may cause excessive palatal coverage. Excessive palatal coverage and adverse soft tissue reaction may occur, and adverse or inflammation below this area of the palate may occur. These are the disadvantages. Indication: it is indicated only when 1 or 2 teeth are to be replaced. That is in case of a short span, and where the edentulous space are tooth bounded, where the remaining natural teeth are present, these are the remaining natural teeth are present, only there we consider this arrangement. It is indicated in short span where only 1 or 2 teeth are to be replaced, and tooth supported edentulous area where there is presence of natural teeth are present. Tooth supported edentulous area, only in these two cases we considered palatal strap as a maxillary major connector. What are the contraindication? We cannot consider it when the anterior replacement with distal extension basis. We have to replace the distal extension. In the distal extension cases, with the anterior replacement of teeth, we cannot consider it. It is considered only where there is remaining dentulous teeth, remaining tooth supported dentulous area are there. So these are the major points. These are the major points of palatal strap. Now, third maxillary major connector is the anterior posterior palatal bar, which is also known as a double palatal bar. It's the most rigid. Anterior posterior palatal bar. It's the most rigid. It is the most rigid palatal major connector. It's the most rigid, and it is indicated in presence of a torus. In case there is a presence of a torus, that is not to be removed. Torus which is not to be removed, in that cases we consider this arrangement of maxillary major connector, that is anterior posterior palatal bar. Anterior bar. Here, why it is known as a double palatal bar? Because here also bar is present, here also. So double palatal bar is present, or anterior posterior palatal bar is present. Now anterior bar is narrower than the width of palatal strap. So Anterior bar is narrow. It is a palatal, it is like a anterior bar is like a palatal strap, but the only difference in this case, it is narrower than the palatal strap. Palatal strap, why we call strap is that which width of palatal strap is greater than 8 mm, but it is less than 8 mm, but it is flat. So anterior bar is narrower than the width of palatal strap. And the posterior bar, this is the posterior bar. Posterior bar is a half oval. It is a half oval, like a palatal bar, like a single palatal bar. It's a half oval with the thickest portion thickest point at the center, like the palatal bar. It is like a palatal. The anterior bar is like a palatal strap which is narrowed than the width of the palatal strap, and the posterior bar is a half oval and its width equal to the single palatal bar, but it is less bulky. It is not indicated. This arrangement is indicated only where there is presence of inoperable tori, and it is not indicated in high palatal vault. This arrangement, that is anterior posterior palatal bar, suppose this is the palatal vault. Normal palatal vault is like this. If it is a high narrow palatal vault like this, then anterior posterior palatal bar or double palatal bar is not considered. In second case, where it is not considered, if the remaining teeth are periodontally weak. If the remaining teeth, suppose these remaining natural teeth are periodontally weak, then the anterior posterior palatal bar is not considered. It's not considered. These are the important feature. What are the important feature? Repeating the important feature of anterior posterior palatal bar is it's a flat anterior bar. Anterior bar is flat, which is narrowed than the palatal strap, which is narrowed than the palatal strap. And the posterior bar is half oval. Posterior bar is half oval, similar to the single palatal bar, and it is indicated only in case where there is presence of a torus palatini. It is contraindicated in case of a high narrow palatal vault is present, in case there is a periodontally weakened tooth is present. In that cases, we don't consider anterior posterior palatal bar. The advantage, what are the advantage of this maxillary major connector? The advantage is that it is the main advantage is rigidity. It is the most rigid maxillary major connector. And disadvantage, it may interfere with the speech. Now fourth, this is the anterior posterior palatal strap or closed horseshoe This is the picture of anterior posterior palatal strap. It is indicated in almost any maxillary partial denture design. It is the most considered, in most of the cases. Anterior posterior palatal strap is considered it is known as a closed horseshoe shape, and it's structurally it is rigid. It is a rigid and anterior border. This is the anterior border. Anterior border should be located posterior in the belly between the rugae crust. This is the rugae crust area. Suppose these are the rugae crust. So anterior border should be present. This is the rugae crust which is present in the anterior hard palate, and the rugae crust and the anterior border of anterior posterior palatal strap should be located posterior in the belly between the rugae crust. These are the rugae crust. This is the rugae crust, and the anterior border should be present in the belly between the rugae crust, not on the crust of rugae, but in between the between the rugae crust that is known as the valley. This is the anterior border. Now the posterior border located at the junction of, this is the posterior border, and it is located at the junction of hard and the soft palate. It's a best designed palatal major connector. And what are the indication of anterior posterior palatal strap? It is indicated in case of Kennedy's class 1 and the class 2 arches. What is Kennedy's class 1? Kennedy's class 1 is bilateral edentulous area which is located posterior to the remaining natural teeth. Bilateral edentulous area which is located posterior to the remaining natural teeth. And class 2 is the unilateral edentulous area located posterior to the remaining natural teeth. In the Kennedy's class 1 and class 2 arches, anterior posterior palatal strap is indicated, and it is also indicated if there is presence of inoperable tori. In case of inoperable tori is present in the palate, then also we consider the anterior posterior palatal strap. These are the two indication, and disadvantage is that this arrangement interfere with the phonetic of the patient. So next one is U-shaped or horseshoe shaped. This is the picture of U-shaped or horseshoe shaped arrangement, and this is least desirable palatal major connector. Least desirable. Why it is least desirable? Because it lack rigidity, and because of its increased flexibility, we don't consider this type of arrangement. This arrangement is considered only in one case, when there is presence of inoperable tori. This is the tori, inoperable tori, extending to the posterior limit of the hard palate. Suppose, what is the posterior limit? Posterior limit in case of strap, anterior posterior palatal strap, the posterior border is located at the junction of hard and soft palate. And if the inoperable tori is extending posterior limit of the hard palate, if the inoperable tori which extending to the posterior limit of the hard palate, tori is extending to the posterior limit of the hard palate, then we considered this arrangement. Otherwise, this arrangement is the least desirable. It lacks rigidity and it has increased flexibility. We don't consider it, but only in case of inoperable tori extending to the posterior limit of hard palate. In only that case we considered or indicate this type of arrangement. Otherwise, it's a least desirable type of maxillary major connector. And anterior border of this arrangement should also be placed in the valley of the rugae. Now the last type of maxillary major connector is the complete palate or palatal plate. Complete palate or palatal plane. It is the major connector that provide greatest retention, and posterior palatal seal is not necessary. In this case, and it is indicated when the anterior and the posterior teeth are to be replaced bilaterally. The disadvantage of this arrangement: whole of the palate is covered in complete plate, so it can lead to hyperplasia or adverse soft tissue reaction. But it is indicated in distal extension cases where the 6 remaining anterior teeth are to be replaced. where the anterior teeth, anterior six anterior remaining teeth are to be replaced, then we consider this arrangement, that is complete palatal wall. Or when an individual with a well developed muscle of mastication, then also we consider this arrangement. Otherwise we don't consider this arrangement. This arrangement, and the posterior border should extend to the junction of soft and this posterior border of this palatal plate should extend to the junction of the hard and the soft palate. We don't give the posterior palatal seal is not necessary in this case. Posterior border should extend at the junction of hard and the soft palate. It is indicated when the six remaining anterior teeth are to be replaced, and disadvantage is that it may lead to adverse soft tissue reaction in the form of inflammation or hyperplasia with it, because it covered the large area of the palate, or whole of the maxillary or palate is covered, so it may lead to adverse tissue reaction. So